What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're finally going to be finishing off all of the update details from last week's massive update. We got a lot of balancing changes, and I've already covered all of the weapon balancing. If you guys have missed that, I will leave a link to the video down below. But now it's time to cover the perks, specialists, equipment, as well as score streaks that changed with that big update from last week. So first up, the range of the acoustic sensor was nerfed. As you can see here, pre-patch, you would get that indicator on your minimap the moment they entered the radius of your fog of war. That was the range before the patch. Now, after the patch, this is where the enemy will show up. So it's not going to be nearly as effective as picking people up at those longer ranges. Also, the patch notes said that it had a shorter detection range for dead silence users as well. But based on my testing, it appears to be pretty much the same. Any change that was made to the detection range of dead silence users with acoustic sensor is negligible when it comes to that minimap radius. Next up, the 9bangs got a nerf to the brightness of them, so pre-patch your screen would be fully white for a noticeable amount of time every time it flashed you. Post-patch, it still reaches that white level, but for a very short period of time. It's only for a couple frames before it starts fading back into your actual image, so that's definitely an improvement. But also, Tac Mask has been buffed against 9bangs, so you no longer put your hand up if you're using Tac Mask and you get hit by a 9bang. This also allows you to get back into aiming down sight a little bit sooner than before, but you can't aim down sight as you're actually being stunned. In this clip, I'm aiming down sight as soon as possible after being stunned with Tac Mask. And this same change carried over to concussion grenades as well. So if you are using Tac Mask against concussions, pre-patch you would put your hand up, post-patch you don't put your hand up, and this does allow you to get back into aiming down sight just a little bit faster. This brings us to the next perk related change, and this one was quite surprising. This is some of the characteristics of Tac Mask were transferred over to Flak Jacket, and this is radiation and fire protection. So keep in mind when I'm doing pre-patch versus post-patch, pre-patch is with Tac Mask, post-patch is with Flak Jacket. But in addition to them transferring those characteristics over, they also made that resistance more powerful with Flak Jacket. So in this first test, this is a tap fire with a purifier, so literally just tapped it. This is as short as you can possibly shoot the purifier. And pre-patch, this would do 107 damage versus a Tac Mask user, and then it would take 15 seconds before you were able to heal yourself. Post-patch versus Flak Jacket, it now only deals 80 damage to you, and also that recovery time is nearly instant, so you could heal yourself very shortly after taking fire damage. Keep in mind that also applies to the radiation damage. Speaking of radiation damage, pre-patch using the reactor core against a Tac Mask user, you would be able to kill them in roughly 3 seconds, which is definitely longer than if they weren't using Tac Mask pre-patch. Post-patch, that characteristic has moved over to Flak Jacket instead, and now you literally cannot kill a full health player with just a reactor core if they're using Flak Jacket, unless you are also using Flak Jacket. Again, I wanted to point out that you can heal almost instantly after taking that radiation damage if you're using Flak Jacket. Another thing I wanted to point out here is the resistance to the reactor core when you are the one using the reactor core and also using Flak Jacket. If you aren't using Flak Jacket, you can use the reactor core for 6.5 seconds before you end up killing yourself. With Flak Jacket now, since it has that added resistance compared to what Tac Mask used to give you, you can use a reactor core for 10.9 seconds before you end up dying. So you can use the reactor core for almost twice the amount of time if you're using that Flak Jacket perk, and therefore it's an excellent combination with Firebreak. Next up, we have another buff to the Tac Mask perk, and this is against the Tempest. Pre-patch, when you got shot by a Tempest and you were using Tac Mask, you could stand up much faster than if you didn't have Tac Mask at 3.5 seconds. After this patch, you can now stand up just 2.4 seconds after being hit by that Tempest, and this is a very noticeable change, although I will point out you do take roughly the same amount of damage from that Tempest. Moving on to the Seeker Mine, the first thing is Seeker Mines can now be shot with usually just one bullet depending on the gun you're using, which is awesome. This makes it a lot easier to counter those Seekers, but in addition to that, the Cold-Blooded perk got a buff in relation to the Seeker Mines. Pre-patch when using Cold-Blooded, this was the range at which a Seeker Mine would detect you, which was fairly close. It was much better than not using Cold-Blooded. But post-patch, you have to be within the range that it can actually reach you with its lead before it will notice that you're even there. So unless you just happen to pass within the path of the Seeker Mine, while using Cold-Blooded, it should never realistically touch you. So finally, this just leaves us with these score streak changes, and for a lot of these score streak changes, I can't really show you before and after because they're like AI controlled. They're just extremely difficult to test with any sort of accuracy. But for the Lightning Strike, I can show this. They have reduced the delay between targeting locations and the jets arriving. This is very noticeable. Pre-patch, from the moment you started putting that tablet away to the moment the first Lightning Strike hit, was 3.69 seconds. Post-patch, that has been reduced all the way down to 2.67 seconds, so about a second faster, which is extremely noticeable, and I would say the Lightning Strike is a very viable mid-range score streak now. Since I've been using this after the patch, I've been finding a lot of triple or quad kills with the lightning strike, whereas pre-patch, I often felt lucky to get 1 or 2 kills. Next up we have the sentry, which got increased damage, so it will kill you a little bit faster. It also got an increased range to where the sentry will target you within a 360-degree radius, which unfortunately I did not have any pre-patch footage of this, so I can't show you the before and after. But what I feel is the most important thing with the sentry is they increase the amount of time that the sentry will remember a target after losing a line of sight. Pre-patch, if a sentry gun targeted you, you took cover, and then you came back out of that cover, it would take about 2.1 seconds before it would realize you were there and start shooting at you, assuming you weren't using cold-blooded, that is. After the patch, it takes about half that amount of time at 1.1 seconds, and therefore sentry guns are a lot more deadly than they used to be. Next up, the drone squad got increased damage, which I really don't think those needed increased damage, but they will now kill you faster. The sniper's nest will take 1 extra rocket to be destroyed. The mantis has increased explosive damage to its rockets, so that's going to be a bit more powerful. The thresher got increased chain gun explosive radius and damage, and it got increased health to balance the damage dealt from an enemy with FMJ2. This just prevents you from basically one-shotting it with a paladin with FMJ2, and I've actually noticed the thresher is far more effective than it used to be, and I think it's pretty much in line where it should be now. I find that I'm often getting 5 or 6 kills fairly consistently with the thresher. As for the strike team, they increased the awareness radius of the strike team members, and they also increased the health regeneration rate of the strike team members. And once again, I've been using strike team a little bit since this update came out, and I have noticed they are quite a bit better than they used to be. So with that, that's finally going to wrap it up for all of the multiplayer changes we've seen with last week's massive update. Of course, as always, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about these changes that they've made? Personally, I think a lot of these changes were excellent. I like the fact that they made Flak Jacket more effective, and they also gave some greater resistance to radiation as well as flame damage. I love that they nerfed that Seeker drone. It's not nearly as much of a threat anymore because you can often just shoot it with 1 bullet and then kill the Prophet that is blindly chasing it. I also like the fact that they've been buffing up some of the score streaks a little bit. Some of them didn't really make a whole lot of sense, like the drone squad for instance, but I'm all for slightly more powerful streaks as long as they're not completely overkill and there's some counterplay to them. And just in general, at least on paper, I'm really liking the update we got last week. However, I did also want to say at the end of this video, my experience with the game since this update released has been generally negative. And this isn't due to the things that they've changed, this is due to the connections that I've experienced for the past week. Something definitely changed with last week's update, and I'm feeling like what they've done is they've become a lot more strict with forcing Black Ops Pass holders to play against other Black Ops Pass holders, whereas before that update, sometimes you'd get in a lobby with Black Ops Pass holders and sometimes you wouldn't. That's just my speculation, but in either case, the gameplay experience online has been very, very poor on average for me since this update came out. And I'm quite frustrated to see that, because like I said, I've liked the gameplay changes they've made, but it's just been generally a bad experience for me. And I'm also kind of curious to know in the comment section below, has anybody else been experiencing this? Like since the update, it's like they flipped a switch and suddenly it just feels like the game is working against you, or am I just being crazy here? In either case, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you guys next time.